Welcome back to the Kempire channel, guys. And I, of course, finally have a special guest back here for you. We have to unpack all of the legality of behind this Sean Diddy Combs indictment. And of course, we have to bring the beautiful, the talented, the intelligent Stephanie St. Aubyn is back. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, boo. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the kind words.
First of all, congratulations on your engagement.
Oh, thank you.
Secondly, congratulations, yes. And congratulations on your new show. Tell us about this project you've been working on for a very long time before we
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I received a grant back in January to fully fund my first pilot episode for my travel and law series, Complexion of Law, which essentially is going to take us through the legal cases and the policies that impact the Black community. We're starting with the United States. My hope and my goal is to eventually showcase the whole diaspora. And essentially, our first case is going through the Shelby v. Holder case, which takes place in Shelby County, Alabama, and is a Supreme Court case decided in 2013. In high-level overview, that Supreme Court case essentially gutted the Voting Rights Act. So I did and it's one of the interesting, I would say most disheartening things about the case is that case has such a wide impact 11 years later, and it's rarely talked about. It's a very little known case. The man, Edward Blum, that actually is responsible for ending affirmative action, the man that sued for the Fearless Fund, which was a program that gave grants to Black women as well as other women of color. And they recently had to stop giving those grants because he sued, stating it was discriminatory. Even though most venture capital money does not go to Black people, that same man is the one who is not from Alabama, went to an Alabama courthouse and decided to fully fund that case and bring about the results of that case. So in the episode, I, along with Halise, who's my co-executive producer, we did a road trip from Atlanta to Shelby County, Alabama. And we also got to interview Attorney General Eric Holder, who is the named defendant in the case. So when you are the Attorney General of the United States, you become the defendant in these federal cases, to talk to him about the case, to talk to him about voting rights, and to talk to him about how do we get, these voting rights back. Because as we've seen, they're trying to remove people from the rolls. They're trying to further disenfranchise people. And most of that is targeted towards Black communities, as well as rural communities and poor communities as well.
And when and where can we watch this?
Yes. So it is currently live on my YouTube channel. It is the most recent video. So when this goes live, you can go ahead over there and check it out as well.
And we'll be posting links to everything, Stephanie, in the description. And Stephanie, since we're talking about voting rights, this week we just had National Registration Voting Day.
Yes.
Everyone is registered to vote, but I had to bring you back for those that may not know anything about Stephanie. She is an attorney, so that's why we have her here today to give us the legal scope of what we're dealing with when it comes to Sean Diddy Combs and what he's doing. But since you brought up voting and why it's so important, I had to ask you, did you see the debate?
Yes, I did. I saw the debate. I covered the debate on my Patreon. I made bets with a few friends on how many lies that former President Trump was going to make. I want to say, first and foremost, shout out to the fact checkers for keeping true to fact checking, because the prior debates that he's done, they just let the lie run rampant. And so they were very good at fact checking the lies, particularly the lie that he continued to repeat that has become like a viral meme now, which is incorrectly and maliciously stating that Haitian immigrants are somehow a danger to people's pets, which is not true. Unfortunately, as we were talking about backstage, because of the lies that JD Vance, who is Donald Trump's running mate, stated, and then Donald Trump repeating it in Springfield, Ohio, there have been numerous death threats, bomb threats, threats against a few schools. Elementary schools had to close for the day because there are currently an influx of Haitian immigrants have moved to the area, revitalized the area. So you have racists running around yelling out these threats against people. And I think as a Black diaspora, it's important that we loudly support the Haitian community, because A, that's the right thing to do when people are threatening our cousins, but B, none of these white supremacists know the difference between a Jamaican Haitian, a Black American, a Nigerian. It's all the same. So if they're threatening Haitian American people in Springfield, Ohio, that means they're just threatening Black people in general as well.
Exactly. And I always say my favorite Dr. King quote is an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So not just because they look like you should be the reason why you want that this rhetoric to stop. Exactly. And it goes back to when he was president and the rhetoric about, Chinese and Asian people and things like that. It caused, even here in New York, our Asian community are being affected by attacks like that. So this is why when we say his rhetoric is dangerous, this is the importance of squashing that, and also the importance of all of you registering to vote. We're not going to tell you who to vote for.
And also checking and making sure you're registered. Vote.org, you can check, because one of the interesting things that I learned, it was news to me when I did my pilot episode, was speaking to various activists as well as civil rights attorneys. Because of the Shelby v. Holder case, there has been concerted efforts by some states, Arizona comes to mind, Texas, etc., where people go through and they challenge people's rights to vote. So your name might have been removed from the rolls, and you might be thinking that you're registered because you were registered, hopefully 2 years ago with midterm elections, because those are equally, if not more important. But it's important to check and to make sure that your name is on there. So that way, come the day, you don't have any issues.
Exactly. And it's quick. It's very, very quick.
Yeah, very quick.
And if you're planning to be away or, start that process. Prepare yourself. Election day is right around the corner.
Yeah, and you can do early voting. I recommend early voting. Just mail it in.
I love early voting.
Less hassle. Also, voting is always on a Tuesday. So unfortunately, it is not a national holiday, even though it should be. Yeah. So early voting makes that easier. And
your employer should allow you the time to go and vote as well.
They should. And if they don't, this is why unions are important. You can gather with a few and make a request to HR.
Just
in writing.
We're reminding you guys of your rights, okay? And that's why I brought a lawyer here, because I always tell you, I have an HR background. However, I brought a lawyer here today, a Jamaican lawyer.
The two of us, we would have gotten in problem in corporate.
Okay, so the main reason that we brought Stephanie back here, and if you missed our last collaboration, first of all, you've had a rebrand as well. I want to mention.
Yes, I have. Oh my gosh, I'm like, what month are we in?
I remember everything. I have an elephant brain. But you have a rebrand. So for those that might be familiar, you used to, your YouTube channel and all of your socials were called Wine and Chill. Now it is allegedly Stephanie.
Yes, I wanted to make it still, legally focused, because Wine and Chill was very vague. It was my baby pet project back when the pandemic started. So I used to drink wine and then talk about the legal cases. Now I'm like, well, sometimes I'm just drinking water, but also trying to explain to AG Holder's team what the heck Wine and Chill was. Yeah. I was like, oh, this will be easier.
You're right. Oh, I didn't even think about that. See, a rebrand.
Listen, so now it's cheeky, but it's still legal, and now it explains itself. So it's rebranded everywhere, except for Patreon. It still says Wine and Chill. I haven't updated Patreon yet. So
yeah, and everything Stephanie St. Aubyn will be available in the description, guys. So make sure you follow and support over there. Stephanie, so before we get into the Diddy of it all, for those that are just don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things so you don't miss out on this. Because Stephanie, again, will be back to break this down, because the Diddy of it all, I just feel like this is just the beginning.
Oh, yes. This is the beginning of what is likely to be a very long trial, which we were talking about. Maybe since this is located in the Southern District of New York, this is a federal case. Maybe potentially we can take a field trip and sit in, if we can get a press pass, and sit in and have live updates. So
we can get a press pass or something. Look,
something. We'll sit in the back. We'll be quiet. I'll pull out my corporate suit. I still have one.
Me too.
Listen, we'll be. I'm. I love that the girl said very demure, very whatever cutesy for so long, but we have to retire it for a second. But we'll be cute. We'll be cute and corporate in the back.
I am more than willing. But before we get to the Diddy of it all, speaking of bail hearings and bails being denied, Bishop Whitehead. Yeah. Can you just give people a brief overview of what that case was and what was the recent update?
Yes, there are a few people in New York City specifically that grind my gears. The first being Eric Adams, our mayor. So if you are a New York City resident, please register to vote. We are allowed to get a new mayor come 2025, and we all need to go knock on some doors. Yeah. So and the second one is his friend, which is Bishop Lamar Whitehead. And they are very good friends. It was very interesting. And Bishop Whitehead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh,
I will just want to put this in your brain.
yes.
There were a few people that stepped down for their positions within Eric Adams' cabinet or whatever you call it.
Yes.
And
Federal investigation, which we can talk about as well.
We can transition into that, and then we'll get to Diddy.
Okay, because I think consequences are circling the block this week, this month. Finally.
Yeah. Bishop Whitehead, though.
Yes. So Bishop Whitehead, notoriously, you might have remembered, was seemingly, according to him, removed of his varying jewelry items as he wore his Louis Vuitton suit while preaching during a live stream in a church, I would say like deep in Brooklyn. Either he was in Flatbush or in Canarsie, predominantly in Caribbean neighborhoods. And, you know, the alleged robbery was fascinating. So that led people to have a lot of questions as to why is a preacher who is preaching in a working class neighborhood, why are you riding around in a Rentley? Why do you have a custom-made Gucci suit, a custom-made Louis Vuitton?
You call it a Rentley?
I doubt that is old. I doubt it. I have significant questions. Why are you online giving prosperity doctrine, stating that you are buying up the block? Where is all this money coming from? After that happened, it then came out simultaneously while I was researching his alleged robbery. It came out that he had a lawsuit with one of his parishioners. The parishioner, who was a woman in her 70s, had claimed that he had stolen all of her retirement money under the guise that he was going to buy her a home, and that because she didn't understand, you know, the U.S. mortgage system and she didn't necessarily have the credit, but she had the cash, that she needed somebody to help her with the home. It then came out and she accused him of fraud. He was then convicted recently of fraud. So he was also sentenced to 9 years for stealing from multiple parishioners, including that woman. And this morning, about 15 minutes ago, it came out that his request for a retrial as well as his appeal was denied. Rightfully so. Rightfully so. Because who steals from the Caribbean aunties that are making our patties? Why would you do that? Why would you do that to the community?
Ain't no good gonna come to you. I just feel like all of you and your ancestors, if he has any children, are going to be affected. Like, why would you do that?
It's hateful. It's a hateful crime. It's a mean-spirited crime. Just for you to wear tacky clothing and, you know, Swarovski crystals that you're saying is actual diamonds.
Oh my God. So he was a fraud all around.
All along.
I know we have not covered, for those that are just watching this, I know we have not covered any of that, but in our research for Diddy, that came up. So I was like, oh, let's mention that. Just so people get an update. If they've been looking for an update, they just got their little update on Bishop Whitehead, who will remain in prison. And yeah, no bail.
Certain people need consequences. They need consequences. Because if you're scamming the elderly, you're the type of person that needs consequences. It reminds me of Jen Shaw.
Oh.
Because she specifically was scamming the elderly. A special type of vile person scams elderly people. You shouldn't scam anybody, but scamming the elderly when they're just simply trying to get a home, it's nasty work.
You hear that, Vicky Gumbelson? I mean, allegedly. Okay. Well, speaking of scamming, we have to talk about Sean Diddy Combs, aka P. Diddy, aka P. D, aka Diddy, aka Love, aka Puff Daddy. I had to look at the indictment. All of the different aliases. Do you think that was by design?
That they used all the aliases?
Well, no, just him having all those different aliases. Or was they, I don't understand.
It's giving megalomaniac for what it's worth. I think you know this. I think I've told you. My first legal internship was at Bad Boy, surprisingly enough, which was a fascinating experience into foolishness. And with that, I do recall he changed his name once. I think it was when he changed it to Brother. One time it was Brother Love. He sent out a company-wide email stating to only address him as such.
Yeah.
And everyone was just like, oh, all right. Yeah.
Hey. I'm sure there's a lot you could tell us about your time over there, but
I'm sure there are a lot of employees that have checked their paperwork to realize that they are now allowed to say things.
Ooh.
I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're seeing people who have been aggressed, abused, and who are fed up with it and are finally like, okay, so now I can finally say something. And I think that part is important to underscore because there are still hopefully it's a shrinking amount of people, but there's still a amount of people who are very loud on the internet who insist on, why is it taking so long? Why are people just now saying something? And my response to that is, when you've been abused, there is no statute of limitations on your emotions of when you are ready for people to publicly blame you, because people like to victim blame, which is awful. But also, I would like to kindly remind, those types of people, how many times do you get treated awfully at work and you don't say anything?
Yeah, you deal with it. You're still there. You're
still there because you need to feed your children, you need to feed yourself. In this economy, you're like, okay, whatever. So
then you add the aspect of Diddy is this powerful person who's gotten away with bad behavior. You've seen him get away with bad behavior
for 3 decades. Years. For our whole life.
They put in the indictment since 2008. And I was like, did they forget a few years?
I think what's interesting, so I pointed that out in my live stream I did yesterday about the indictment, them trying to make the indictment like the past 20 or so, 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm. They did say during the press conference, the Attorney General did state that the indictment, it was an open investigation, so they may be adding things on. Because I think the 3 claims or the 3 counts that they charged him with, conspiracy to racketeering, trafficking, and then trafficking for use of fraud. And then what was the third one again?
Something with prostitution.
Yes. And then furtherance of prostitution or something of that nature. I think those are their 3 basis claims. And their 3
prostitution. I'm sorry.
Say one more time. Sorry.
Transportation for prostitution.
Yes. I think those are going to end up by the time we get to trial being their 2 like anchoring charges. And I think they're probably going to add a few more.
So the conspiracy for racketeering, initially when I first heard that and I saw the possible life in prison, I thought, okay, that must be the hardest one to prove. But I've been hearing conflicting things that's not true.
That's the easiest one to prove, actually. Which is interesting. So conspiracy is always in terms of legal terms when you get charged. So these are all federal charges. These are all criminal charges. So I know he's had a lot of civil lawsuits. So now we've moved to, where you get thrown in the chokey. And conspiracy essentially means you have colluded and planned with other people to commit a crime. So the crime here is racketeering. So conspiracy to racketeering is you don't have to prove that the actual racketeering occurred. You have to just prove that you and all these people, so some of the people named, whether they were coerced or not, some executive employees, some other people he hired. So the person that is procuring the AR-15s, which he had 3 of them, multiple magazines.
Scary. Okay, they showed the pow pow pows.
They did, which we cannot show on here. I don't think.
I thought they were going to actually show the baby oil in the lube too.
Hell no.
Oh, you know what? To be honest, when I first read that in the indictment, and then I saw and I listened to the whole press conference, the sheer amount that you would have to procure is just mind blowing. And then also, I think Cassie's lawsuit details so much the abuse. It reminded me very much of, do you remember that old movie Taken?
Yes.
And do you know the part where the daughter doesn't end up there, but the girl that the daughter meets that goes to the party ends up at this like awful like mining site? Yes. And it's like very traumatizing. It reminded me of that and like how much pain these people must have been put through, because you have that. And then you also have the mention of IV fluid to wake you up. So you're on call for abuse.
It's the insane part for me. And maybe you can give me some sort of rationalization as to why, even after the lawsuit was exposed and we knew all of these things, why did he still have these items at his home?
And I think that is one of the biggest pieces of evidence that the prosecution can use to say this person is not only a flight risk, this person needs consequences. You cannot let them out on bail because they continued their abusive behavior, because why are you still harboring all these things in your home?
Yeah, insane to me. First of all, I also think just a dumb criminal.
It's hubris. I think at this point, I think he's a prime example of showing somebody who's gotten away with unfathomable things being like, well, what's going to happen? I'm like, well, now you're getting consequences.
So I was listening to CNN and they were saying, because a lot of people suspect, because this is an ongoing investigation from the Southern District of New York, that other people might be tied to this, indictment. However, they gave a different perspective. And this is why I love hearing different legal perspectives on this, that they say, well, maybe some of these assistants, some of these people that were procuring these, freak offs, and maybe some high level executives have been working with the SDNY. What is your perspective on that?
I think it's probably a mix of both. I think there's a mix of coercion for sure, particularly when there are large power imbalances. So if we were saying like, oh, he forced his assistant to procure an AR-15, which is a terrifying machine that is a semi-automatic weapon, there's clearly a huge power imbalance there. There's clearly coercion. When you get to the level of, say, like his vice president of insert whatever department, then you have less likelihood of coercion, because I'm like, well, this is somebody with money. You could still threaten them, you could still blackmail them, etc. But then you get into kind of a gray area. I think what the prosecution has done, which is quite smart, is they've basically mapped the indictment to all of the public civil lawsuits. So when you read the indictment, even though they don't say any of the victims' names, if you've read the lawsuits and you've kept up with the civil lawsuits, you know who is being referenced in which part. And
Cassie was referenced a few times in this indictment.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of high executives, Harve Pierre has been named in quite a few of the, civil lawsuits against and Harve Pierre, who was a president at Bad Boy. I wonder, do you think maybe he's cooperating with the SDNY?
I think most people are probably cooperating. However, certain people, even if they are cooperating, I'm not sure that SDNY is going to be willing to give them blanket immunity, because as stated in the indictment and then stated during the bail hearing by varying assistant prosecutors, there is video evidence, there's phone recordings, there's all of these other things. So I'm not sure, since we haven't seen what all of the evidence is, what type of leverage it would be to tell somebody like, hey, you cooperate, maybe I'll lessen your sentence, but you also might need some consequences.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, speaking of the bail hearing yesterday, the magistrate judge denied bail for Diddy. Today, at the time of this recording, the bail, the one with the district judge hasn't happened yet. So for those that are watching this afterwards, what do you suspect will happen today in regards to this bail hearing after it was denied yesterday?
I suspect it's going to be denied again. And if I could share my screen really quick. So this is the original letter from Diddy's defense team. And this letter states, what they are willing to offer in terms of bail. And the thing that I think has jumped out to a lot of people, and that jumped out to me, is Diddy offered up his home, the equity in his home, about $48 million, the equity in his mother's home. Whether or not he has a legal right to be offering up his mother's home is one of my questions, which is interesting. And then he also offered the passports of the following family members who have already surrendered their passports to counsel after the raids on Mr. Combs' home. Janice Combs, his mother, Chance Combs, Jesse Combs, Delilah Combs, and Love Combs, all whom are his daughters, all underage. Love Combs is a toddler at this point, which people have rightfully been questioning why. You have also other children, young men.
Justin Combs.
Why are none of their passports being offered? It comes across as if you are using your young daughters as well as your mother as leverage, which would then give weight to the accusations that you are participating in coercion, you are participating in holding women against their will. There's kidnapping claims in here, arson, etc., which the arson is in relation to the Kid Cudi incident, presumably. And so the interesting thing, and one of my outstanding legal questions about this, is still, how does he have the legal capacity to even offer up Janice Combs' passport when she is a fully grown adult, unless he has some type of conservatorship over her, or he has something stating that he is legally responsible for her? It's very odd. This is not the normal course of action, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And I think one of my thoughts as to why I think it will also, his bail will get denied today again, in the updated letter that they are now proffering to the district court judge, they are stating, okay, we'll also stipulate that at Diddy's homes, he is not allowed, and they use the word female, which I'm like, any lawyer using the word, I'm like, women and girls? What's wrong with women and girls? What's wrong with that? And quotes that they will not allow any female that is not family members to be in his home, which in my opinion is slightly an admission of guilt of saying this person not to be trusted around any women.
Yeah.
And
But what
according
about
to
the men
these
that are
civil
accusing
lawsuits or men, as that's what I was going to say. I was like, he shouldn't be trusted around anyone.
No one. Like, okay. So today is the district judge that will be overseeing this case will be taking a look on whether or not they should give him bail. But one of the videos that I did yesterday talking about this, the reasoning behind yesterday's denial is not just because he's a possible flight risk. They're more concerned with him being in contact with grand jury witnesses. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things that he was trying to demonstrate in today's appeal, is that I won't reach out to any of the witnesses. However, one of the things we found out yesterday, what was it, 50-something times he reached out to Kalena Harper from, formerly of Diddy Dirty Money.
Mm-hmm. In 4 days.
How many?
In a span of 4 days.
Well, that's where it was. 54 times in 1 day. I think it was 58 times in 4 days.
Which, if somebody is calling you that, like the amount of fear you would invoke in somebody if you even call them more than 5 times.
Yeah. Like, what's going on? Like, what's the emergency? And then she subsequently went on her social media and says, I'm named multiple times in this lawsuit. I did not experience what Dawn Richard experienced. Dawn Richard's lawsuit is 55 pages, which we've covered a little bit here on the channel. It's another civil lawsuit. She worked with Diddy since Making with the Band and then his group, Diddy Dirty Money. What will happen to these civil lawsuits? Because one of the things that I heard this morning on CNN is that the indictment from the SDNY, if he gets convicted, the lifestyle, the money, the power that he once had disappears.
So the interesting thing about a racketeering charge, when you charge somebody with racketeering, so this is conspiracy to racketeering, it's a little bit different. If you charge somebody with a RICO charge, you, as the federal government is essentially stating, you have done all of these things, and by doing things, you have wrongfully and illegally amassed wealth, money, car status, and that's where you get repossession because of RICO. So Miami is famous for this. Like in the 80s, people always joke because in Florida, there is no income tax, no federal state income tax. In Miami, there's no city tax. People are like, who the heck built the turnpike? It's like drugs. Drugs built all of this, but you cannot repossess a highway. But you can repossess somebody's Picasso in their home. You can repossess their yacht. You can repossess all of these things. The federal prosecution has yet to put forth the amount of money and damages that they would need to recoup from him to make his victims whole. Yeah. Assuming that all of this goes forward at the same time, I still think that those with a civil claim will still get paid out as well, because this is, their claims are tied to the same thing. So I think if the federal government were to repossess some of that money, well, the whole purpose is to give restitution to your victims. So the victims are who? Don Richards, Cassie Ventura, I'm forgetting his name right now, the producer.
Low Rod.
So you have various other people. It will be interesting to see because the federal system is very slow. So it's not like trial is going to start this month. It's not going to start this year.
So he could be in prison in Brooklyn with the same prison that R. Kelly was staying at.
Yeah, he's in a special housing unit in the,
and we're going to unpack some more of this indictment. Guys, you're just joining us. I'm here with Stephanie Aubyn from Allegedly Stephanie here on YouTube. All of her information and all the things that you can follow in regards to Allegedly Stephanie will be available in the description. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to both of our pages while you're doing that. All right. So one of the things that stood out to me in regards to this whole Diddy situation, I lost my train of thought in regards to it. Okay, we can say again?
I said, you're fine.
No. So back to this indictment and the bail hearing that's supposed to happen today. We don't believe, and you don't believe in your legal mind that it will be granted, correct?
I don't believe so. Usually what the magistrate does for like regarding bail, the district court judge is usually a similar mindset.
Okay. All right.
Because I think actually, a good example, which his alleged crimes are nowhere near the same thing. I'm actually not a proponent of the expansion of RICO in the way it's been used in the YSL Young Thug case. And I have a video on that. I need to do an update on that. But if you look at Young Thug, he's been sitting in the pen all this time.
Yeah.
His bail has consistently been denied. And those are very different claims.
Wow.
So because the prosecution is able to procure voicemails, video evidence, examples of him intimidating someone who is likely to be a witness.
Yeah.
I think that's enough for a judge to state, like, what are we getting for letting you out? Like,
yeah.
Based
on what we've seen and heard, like his influence spans just the music industry. It looks like he has people within the police departments as well. It made me wonder like what his life behind bars is going to be like, because I'm sure he has connections there as well.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see this play out from outside of the legal perspective, but the perspective of somebody who for nearly 3 decades has just acted in a very egotistical, maniacal way and has been like celebrated for it.
Yeah. And the disturbing part, like I said before, look, I'm not encouraging criminal behavior. However, the fact that Cassie came out with this lawsuit and detailed all of your bad behavior, and still you had all of the evidence, the video recordings, the 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. What did they do with that?
Oh, friend.
What do you just keep it in a thing and case is over? What?
Nothing that you or I need to imagine. Again, it sounds very painful.
Well, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I would say based on Cassie's, like even reading Cassie's lawsuit, I was like, oh God, it was just so hard to read. So I'm like that on like a mass scale.
Yeah. But again, still in his home. Crazy to me. So I remembered what I wanted to talk about before, because I find it so interesting. I don't know a lot about Sean Combs's father, but I do know that he was involved in criminal activity. So it's so interesting that you had the story of coming from nothing and wanting to be different than your father, because he lost his father when he was 3 years old.
Oh, I don't know anything about his dad.
Well, Google it, y'all. Apparently his father was into some things back in the day.
That's unfortunate.
And he was trying to build a different life. Only it seems as if you built the same type of life.
If not worse, maybe? Probably
a lot worse. So that was in the back of my mind in regards to like, whoa, like this is what you created this idea that you were this successful Black man, coming from nothing. But people have speculated on how you started Bad Boy Records. People have speculated how you've amassed the power and influence that you have across not just entertainment and music, but in other arenas. People have said that there are videos of very high profile individuals that probably now are in the access of the SDNY. So that I just feel like,
does it rhyme? Is it initials and then it rhymes with rakes?
Well,
you know what? Prosperity preachers need to see their day in the light. So,
I mean, there've been, I think people have taken some of the things that people made jokes about, and they were like, oh, and they were like crazy rumors, only for us in 2024 to see that a lot of that stuff was true. Crazy.
Yeah. Crazy. And people were encouraging it. I said yesterday on my live stream too, and I was like, he's not attending these all white parties by himself.
Yeah.
So how many people are co-signing this behavior? How many people are just like, oh, well, this is the pinnacle of success. So like, I didn't know, so I'm just here. And then how many people are also participating in this type of behavior?
Yeah. Ugh. So
because he's not going down alone.
That's
definitely not happening.
That was my other question, because I've seen people talk about, do you think that the Southern District of New York is going to have some sort of plea deal with him? Some legal minds do not believe that they will. If they're coming after you, they already have what they need. So you agree with that you don't believe that there will be a plea deal? Why is that?
Yeah. So I would say just to guess on my end without like actually pulling up the statistic, because usually I like to have my statistics. From an observation, when the federal government comes after you and you have a federal case, it's not a state case. You're not just going to, your local municipal court. When the federal government is taking you to federal court, they have, generally speaking, from what I've noticed, usually 7 to 10 years, a decade's worth of evidence where they're just like, you did that? Interesting. Did that? You did that. So they don't bring cases to then try to prove the case in court. They bring a case that they know is already proven.
Wow.
So they have a very high prosecutors, which for better or worse, I have strong feelings about how I think our judicial system is set up and how it incentivizes bad behavior, in my opinion.
Can you explain that? I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So specifically because we live in the United States, and if you want to have an understanding of history of the United States was built on chattel slavery of Black American people. And essentially a lot of our laws have stemmed from trying to control formerly enslaved people. So who gets to be a person? That was a law. When Black people were designated as only 2/3 of a person, that was actually so that way Southern states could have more votes. So the Northern states were like, well, you don't treat those people like people, so you can't count them. So you shouldn't have more representatives in the House of Representatives. The Southern states pushed back and said, well, we should count them, but like, you're right, we don't treat them like people. So what about 2/3? Let them be 2/3. And now Southern states, South Carolina, North Carolina, lower populations than Northern states at that time, they're getting more representation that they weren't supposed to get, for example. So all of our laws basically come down from that system, and they've changed in various ways, but the racism is implicit in our laws. So our penal system, our criminal justice system, incentivizes prosecutors where they are incentivized based on what is your win rate. So your win rate of how do you win? People go to jail. That's how you win as a prosecutor. You have your case as closed. You win your case by people going to jail. I don't think that is the best way to run a functioning society. Instead, you can focus people on like, okay, how many people did we rehabilitate? If I'm stealing food from you, that's because I'm hungry. So shouldn't we, instead of locking me up and you say, oh, well, I won, I sent Stephanie to jail because she's stealing food. Instead, shouldn't we ask me why I'm stealing the food? Like, oh, why are you hungry? Like, oh, well, maybe we need free lunch for the kids, and then she won't be stealing the food anymore, etc. So while I I would say like voicefully voice my qualms with that, the other spectrum of it is people like Diddy, who it's documented that there's abuse, there's all of these things. People will push back, and in the press conference, people did push back on the AG and asked, why did this take so long if y'all are saying stemming back to 2008? To which the AG kind of said, well, that's a great question. I don't know. AKA, I was not in this job at that time, so I don't know why you're asking me. But also, more importantly, we're here now. And at that point, they're basically alluding to the fact, like, we have the evidence now, so he's not coming out. There's no point of having a plea deal. According to the indictment and what we can see, he is the orchestrator of the racketeering. He is the orchestrator of the trafficking. All of the people working for him are working to further his trafficking enterprise, which he is the orchestrator of these things. It's not like
enterprise, as they refer to.
Yeah, their enterprise. And it's not like there's some maniacal person behind him pulling the strings and saying, hey, do this, do that, and like, I'll give you whatever. He did it because he allegedly wanted to do it.
Wow.
So I don't think he's getting a plea deal. Because if the federal government wanted to give him a plea deal, they wouldn't have gone about it this way.
Oh, wow. So, okay, explain that. When you say that the way that they went about this, like, what were the signs to you? Like, yeah, there's no plea deal happening here.
The raids on his home, the two raids on the LA home and the Miami home. It's interesting, in his bail letter, his lawyer states like, we knew the raids were happening. No, you didn't. Because then you would have tossed out the 1,000 bottles. You would have hid the AR-15s that have scratched off serial numbers. That alone is a federal crime. You are not allowed to purchase a weapon and scratch off the serial number. So that's not true. You didn't know. Now you're surprised. The way that his lawyer is trying to say like, oh, see, he willingly submitted in New York. He came to New York specifically so he could submit. He's staying at the Hyatt.
What's that about?
This is an alleged billionaire staying at the Hyatt. It sounds like he's hiding, friend.
Well, I mean, just to be devil's advocate, he was Harlem shaking up in Harlem not too long ago this week. So he does.
That's true. I think his hubris does love to be on Instagram.
So I mean,
I think the lawyer would agree with him being on Instagram.
How do you feel about the attorney? Because one of the things that we reported on earlier today was that the attorney seems to be attacking Cassie. Yes. Cassie's lawsuit, I think, has triggered all of this.
Yes.
And I saw a comment, someone said, Cassie's playing chess, not checkers, because not only did she get her settlement, which I know is definitely more than 30 million, because that's what the attorney's revealing now. First of all, okay, I have so many questions. Is the attorney, by talking about the what played out before their settlement, in the settlement, don't they sign a non-disclosure?
They usually do. So without seeing the documents, I think that is a very valid question of why would she and her attorney have agreed to a settlement agreement that did not promise her full non-disclosure so that way she could move on, which means his attorney is likely breaking that agreement because he's allowed to talk with it to his attorney, but there's probably definitely a gag order on both of them from speaking out the situation and each other, unless in the court of law, which you're making press conferences saying these things.
Yeah.
Like that has nothing to do with your case. You're not at a hearing. Some of the things he's saying at a hearing, so that like might be his way of getting around it.
Yeah.
But this is not, then you should have requested a closed hearing.
And he's also spinning that video footage that we saw of the now closed Intercontinental Hotel, where we see Diddy abusing Cassie in the hallway.
In 4K, yes.
Yeah, he's accusing her of cheating. They were cheating on each other for years. She married the trainer that Diddy hired for her.
Which is a very weird way to spin somebody. I would say the other end of that, somebody saving you from what is clearly an abusive situation.
I had to ask a lawyer what they thought of a lawyer's.
This is I don't think it's a hot take, but this is my opinion. When you choose to be that type of lawyer, his whole goal, he's being compensated on, I need to get my client out. That's his goal. So morality and ethics be damned. I'm getting compensated. Again, back to my issues with the way prosecutors are incentivized. If you're incentivized to do the wrong thing, well, you need to be the best at doing the wrong thing. So Cassie and her feelings, her reputation, that is irrelevant to him because he's not being compensated on that. That him being taking the correct, morally high ground is not what he's being compensated on.
Well,
he's being compensated on throwing mud at her, which I think his tactic, honestly, is very sleazy because he's not realizing by throwing any type of stray her way, he's also pushing it back on his client.
Yeah.
So it's not a very well thought out strategy.
Especially when we have video footage.
There is nothing to excuse what he did to her in the video footage. There's no talking out.
The attorney is alleging, she hit him first with a cell phone.
Wait, is that in the video? Is that shown in the video?
She clearly looks like she's escaping. Sidebar. People are saying that Cassie played chess, not checkers, because not only did she get her settlement agreement, she's still taking this man down.
My God, today.
Ladies. And she's getting her justice, as she should. She's getting her restitution, and she's getting her justice, because she's never going to get those a decade of her life back. And the therapy that she, Dawn, Lil Rod, and all of his other victims are likely having to go through, I'm sure it's not cheap.
And addiction, because she accuses him in her lawsuit of forcing her to take drugs and things like that. And I'm sure she probably used some of that to numb the trauma that she was experiencing. Like there's no money that can fix that.
Yeah, exactly.
Lord. What do you expect to happen with this case? If there's not going to be an appeal and you don't believe that there will be a bail for Diddy,
no.
What do we expect to happen here, and what direction do we think his team is going to go? Because so far, I'm not an attorney, but I just feel like no, Diddy might need some new attorneys.
These attorneys I don't think are equipped to handle this. I don't think any attorney is going to be able to get him out of this for what it's worth. I think what we're going to see is if his bail gets denied in an hour, which I think it is going to get denied. His attorneys are then going to push. You can, as the defendant, you can ask for a speedy trial. They're going to push for a speedy trial with the hopes of, okay, if we get the trial over with, then you can get out. And instead, I think that's going to equal a trial early next year where he's going to be found guilty.
On all counts?
Conspiracy for
minimum of
racketeering.
15 years. Minimum of 15 years on one of the other charges. But conspiracy for racketeering, it's life in prison.
Yeah, I think conspiracy to racketeering is, there's so much evidence there. There are going to be people that they're going to subpoena to be like, yeah. The next was trafficking. I mean, the definition of trafficking is moving somebody across. There's enough photo evidence of, hey, you moved all these people in your jet. And then the last is prostitution, which his team, if I remember correctly, I think his team has basically alluded to, I think the new lawyer actually in the last motion hearing essentially stated, incorrectly, it is a lie, but he essentially stated that Cassie and Diddy were having consensual freak-offs. However, you are now admitting that your client is hiring male sex workers. The other person is saying it's not consensual. You're already admitting partially to the prostitution element of you're paying.
See, that's another thing that I saw on CNN earlier today in regards to, they feel like that is a flaw within the prosecution's indictment and case, that there is that aspect of, how do we know that this was not consensual adults involved in here? How do you feel about that?
I think while that argument, sadly, is the argument that's always weaponized against victims, like, well, I thought it was consensual, so it has to be consensual. And it's usually in a gender dynamic, male, female. All of these victims are very loudly saying it's not consensual. So I would say while the he say, she say sometimes doesn't pan out well for people, the prosecution has alluded to video evidence. You cannot consent if the other person is on drugs. So I don't know if they had it in your college, but in mine, they had like a chart where it was like the consent chart, and they were like, it was everywhere at UCF. And the consent chart was yes plus yes equals yes. Yes plus no equals no. Yes plus maybe equals no. Yes plus drugs equals no. Yes plus alcohol equals no. And so,
when were you in college? First of all, I think there's a big age gap between you and I.
UCF is too many. Said there's too many of y'all to monitor. They're now the largest school in America. They were the third largest when I went there, and they're like, there's too many hooligans for us to monitor. Y'all better look at the chart.
No, but which I think is fantastic. I wish we did.
I think they were ahead of the curve with that.
Consent is an important conversation. I think that conversation needs to happen even before college or high school. I mean, I've heard parents, I'm not a parent, but I've heard parents talking about like slowly starting that conversation of consent with like their young children.
Yes, I think it's important to talk to, because kids always know, and like there's always that conversation of like, you should not. I think now people are more willing to have it of, don't force your kids, particularly like your young daughters, to hug people if they're uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable for a reason. Maybe they don't like to be hugged, or maybe they get a weird vibe. Don't be forcing kids to do these things. Did you
see that post that Mama Tina Knows posted just the other day on her social media about Beyonce kissing this homeless man? I implore you all, and I don't know if she's taking it down, but one of the things that I saw a lot of people say in the comment section, like, oh, this is a little cringy, Mama Knowles, that you guys allowed her just to kiss this homeless man, or made her.
Also, what if he didn't want her to kiss him? People love to invade other people's boundaries.
Yeah. But speaking of like of a particular age, we know growing up, some parents were like, go hug auntie, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Mind you, that's not your
Our
auntie,
age, I had to hug everybody. And I'm just like, well, somebody's hugging me too long. Yep. I don't want to do it.
That part. Okay. Before we let you go, Stephanie, I want to know anything else that you wanted to say on this Diddy situation. Like I said, you're going to have to come back because I feel like this is going to be.
I think it's going to be weak. I think weekly we're going to get updates most likely. Oh, just to finish my thought with the consent conversation. I think while the prostitution claim might be the hardest to prove because you're going to get into the victim versus the perpetrator and who sees consent as which way, there is video evidence. So because he, according to many of these victims, without their consent, videotaped them, which is essentially illegal. As well as if you're videotaping people without their consent, there's also the prosecution, because the indictment was only 14 pages. So they've also alluded to the fact that because these people are being supplied narcotics, they can tell there's no consent in the video because these people are either they seem to be motionless, they don't seem coherent, etc. So I think that which it will be extremely painful to play that in a courtroom. Which is why I don't think this will be a public trial. That would also further show, hey, there is no consent here. We are watching, RAPE occur. This is an awful thing. So I don't think, because I know people are curious to know if this will be a public trial. I doubt it.
One of the other things that I noticed this morning in my research of this case is that they're saying that he created this enterprise, the Combs enterprise, just for his sexual gratification. Because normally, I guess
that's one of his companies, which is like also ironic. One of the companies is called Combs Enterprises.
Yeah,
it's the umbrella company.
And I was sort of like, wait, isn't that name his company? But
but the legal term enterprise is just like a nebulous of an organization to further a racketeering scheme.
And they're saying, and another lawyer said that she's like, I've never really seen that in an indictment, but it's interesting that he just did this for his own gratification. It wasn't necessarily for more money. It wasn't necessarily for more profit. It was just for his own, like, ew.
Yeah. And I think that's the most shocking part, because to your point about like, oh, well, what happens like with repossession usually goes with RICO, because usually there's some furtherance of the crime because you're trying to, buy off politicians, or you want to own the state of Florida, or you want to do whatever. It doesn't seem like there's any type of motivation or any type of outcome with that. It just seems to be this person creating a trafficking ring for themselves and to harm others, which all types of racketeering is awful. This is a particular level of like malevolence that I think everyone is a bit shocked by.
And it makes me wonder who else is going to go down in this.
Yeah.
That is what's interesting. Like I said, I feel like there will be like the lower level folks, like the assistants and things like that will cooperate. But there have been rumors that some of the people that are on these videotapes are very high profile individuals.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it, to be honest, because other high profile people have had whispers about them for years as well.
Yeah.
So, if we're going to start this train of consequences, why don't we just gather everyone together?
I also saw this morning a long list of individuals that resigned from their positions, including Kevin Liles, who's been in the music industry for a very long time as well. But quite a few people stepped down from their positions yesterday.
Oh, this is news to me. We'll have to go through this list. Yeah. I'm very curious.
Yes, I'm going to have to send it to you. But I thought that was very interesting. Quite a few stepped down from their positions yesterday. And then
I'm curious to know where they're at today, this morning.
Yeah, me too. And I'd also be interested to know, because we were briefly talking about Eric Adams and individuals closely associated with him within his, administration also are under federal investigation. So is there a connection? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I guess we will. I think consequences are in the air. Hopefully it catches everyone.
Guys, you let us know in the comment section whether or not you want us to show up at the on a field trip to the courthouse so that we can look, we're going to do it anyway. If we can get in Stephanie and I going to be bosom buddies during this damn trial.
Listen, because it's so many years in the making of like
decades.
When I interned there, I was a 1L in law school, and I remember being like, oh, this is my first legal internship, like this is amazing, like I can't believe I got here. And I remember being like, our company supposed to function? Is this normal? This is
gonna call you.
okay. Oh, and I was like, and I gotta go. Yep.
Stephanie, has the NDA expired?
Yeah, I checked.
Well, I mean, look, I feel like there are a lot of people that have seen a lot of things at different levels and in different exposures. So we're going to continue to follow this story, guys. As always, Stephanie, what is coming up for you, and where can everyone follow you? And what's
Yes. And for what it's worth on my end, basic corporate level harassment that you see at every corporation, none of the things mentioned in the indictment for what it's worth. However, I will say I was taken aback as that was my first corporate job, and I was excited to be at a Black company to see that I was like, at a Black company? But wait, there also a year before was an entire lawsuit by an intern that sued because they were doing work under the table and did not get paid.
Wow.
Yeah, but it should show you how these types of places are propped up to be, oh wow, if you make it here, you can make it anywhere. Like, this is amazing, etc., to condition you to accept abuse. I got a few interviews after that internship, and they literally told me, the interviewers, senior attorneys, oh, I only gave you this interview because you worked at Bad Boy, so I know you have thick skin. And I was like, what does that mean?
Well, you have to read through Dawn Richard's lawsuit, because that's one of the things that she said. He manipulated her to believe like this is what it takes to be a star. And a lot of people have been, and we can talk about it. We can talk about it here, how differently people are treating Aubrey O'Day versus how they're treating Dawn Richard.
The misogynoir of it, the colorism, because she is a brown-skinned Black woman.
Yep. Just saying, like, we have to call a thing a thing.
But and be your own people too. So then you're sitting there like, how are you see? And then people wonder why victims don't come forward sooner, because people are sitting there trying to calculate how many of these people are going to try to tear me down for me simply just being like, yeah, all these awful things happened to me. And
mind you, there is no money in the world that's going to fix that level of trauma. I'm sure they're still dealing with that level of trauma currently, not even realizing it. And some people are waking up after seeing what Cassie went through, like, oh, I was in a toxic work environment and did not even realize it.
Yes. And if people can take away at least that fact for themselves, I think that part is important, because so many people on like much less nefarious scales, but enough that it's impacting you when you get home, enough that you're like, oh, like I feel off. Like people have normalized Sunday scaries. Why does like we shouldn't normalize society where everybody on Sunday is terrified, has anxiety because their boss is an unhinged person.
Terrible. And guys, I know one of the things that I saw recently, because we talk a lot about human resources here. A lot of people don't feel like they can trust their human resources. There are things outside of your company that you can reach out to in regards to unfair work environments and things that are toxic work environments. So please understand that, do your research, Google schmoogle it, as we love to say. But I haven't forgotten, allegedly, Stephanie, what's coming up for you and what should people be looking out for?
Yes. So on my channel, Allegedly Stephanie, I'm going to try to get back to my weekly live stream. Particularly, we'll be covering this. We'll be covering any other cases. Fingers crossed, I got some more grant money to do in episode 2 and 3 for Complexion of Law.
Yes,
waiting on that. Thank you. I'm crossing my fingers. We'll see. So I've had some talks. So I'm like, okay, I should find out next month. And then overall, I'll just be over here. I'll be on Instagram. I'll be on Patreon. I'm forcing myself to be on TikTok, so I'll be on TikTok. So come say hey.
You have to be on TikTok. And your name is Allegedly Stephanie over there.
It's Allegedly Stephanie everywhere. Patreon, it's still Wine and Chill. I'll change it right now. But yeah, so it's Allegedly Stephanie. We're making everything the same.
Well, Stephanie, as always, we appreciate you taking time out. Like I said, the last time we collaborated, you'll have to come back, because this Diddy situation alone is going to be a lot. Oh yeah,
we're going to be in the courthouse, because
we always need a beautiful Jamaican attorney to come through and give us the tea on the legal tea. Because look, I can pretend to be a lawyer. I've worked with thousands of them, but I still did not go to law school. So I like to double check with you.
At least the student loans are paying off somehow.
Oh
yeah. We'll be making our field trip to the courthouse, because how else are we going to sift through it quickly and in real time?
To be honest with you, I like that, because I could go there and just be like, okay, I know what I'm hearing, but it'd be nice to be like, oh, Stephanie, what the hell does that mean?
Exactly. And because also one of the interesting things, I would say, because of the high profile nature of this so far, the reporting has been pretty good. But I'm also still seeing a little bit of vague reporting where CNN is like saying something like, okay, yes. Like, for example, he called, what was her name again? The other member of Diddy Dirty Money.
Kalena Harper.
So he called Kalena Harper so many times. In court, it specifically said he called Kalena Harper X amount of times. The CNN article is like, he called somebody. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's important to note the context of who he called, because then if you're following it, you also know like, oh yeah, you remember when she made her statement. Now why she's retracting. So that way it also rehabilitates, her as a character witness as well to the public of like, oh, she's not being wishy-washy. She's terrified. Rightfully so.
Oh, I'm glad you pointed that out. See why we need a legal mind here?
We do. And we're going to have to take a field trip. We are.
Yeah, because look, I don't want to go to court, but I'll go to court for someone else's case.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, knock on the wood.
Stephanie, it's always fun having you here. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your thoughts. As always, guys, more information on Stephanie St. Aubyn will be available in the description. Don't forget, it's so important, especially people that look like us. Talking about these topics are important. So go over and support like you always do. We appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you all in the next one. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me.
You bring the lighter, I got the fuse. You make a fire, I'll add the fuel. Follow my lead, just watch the shoes. Gotta turn the heat up.